So hi everyone, thank you for coming back to the Bright to Light pod. Hope you enjoyed the first episode with Brian. Today I have a friend, another Northampton optometrist, who is going to just share their journey and we're going to have a conversation. So I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Sheena Tanna-Shah. Hi Sheena.
Hi, Keyur. Thanks so much for having me on.
You know what? I'm just glad you said yes. Yeah, I know I know you're busy. You got so much stuff going on. You got the kids, you got work, you and Piyush seem to be traveling and doing amazing things. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, of course.
And like I sort of said, when I asked you to do this, it's just really informal. It's
Yeah.
just informal, honest. Your journey. We can crack some jokes, all that kind. We can make fun of
Yeah.
Piyush as much as we want, and then we'll immortalize it on the internet. And
Absolutely.
just have a bit of fun. So I'm just going to start because I don't think I can introduce you as well as you could introduce you.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe just, where you kind of grew up. And actually, I'll start with the question. First question. So where you grew up, kind of stuff, bit of background. And then the first question is going to be, did you always want to be an optometrist?
Okay. So I grew up in London for 7 years, and then my family moved to Leicester. So predominantly most of my life was spent in Leicester. And then did I want to be an optometrist? So I now live in Northampton, literally neighbours to you. But did I want to be an optometrist? No, is a simple answer to that.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a psychologist for a long time.
Okay.
And with our culture and the background that we come from, we have these conversations with parents, and it was a typical, get a secure career. And in a roundabout way, our parents wanted to give us that security because they never had that, right? So it was looking at careers that gave us that security. And for my mom, especially, it was a case of, is it going to give you flexibility? And if you have children, in fact, back then it was when you have children, not if you have children.
Yeah.
So we looked at different professions and things like that. And it was at college when I did a shadow day, an experience day at a local optometrist, and found it to be actually quite insightful, something I thought I could do. And after that shadow day, experience day, I decided to go ahead and explore optometry. And that's where my journey began.
Okay. Where did you do your degree, Sheena? Were you at
So I did
Cardiff?
my degree in Cardiff. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we know you're an optometrist.
Yeah.
Are you still an optometrist? Do you still see patients?
Yep. So I'm still a practicing optometrist. I've been practicing optometry for a very long time, it feels like. So 19 years or so I've been practicing optometry, and I
Yeah.
practice now currently 1 day a week in a multiple.
Okay. Fine. So do you enjoy that element? So the question really was, when I started this whole thing,
Yeah.
it was going to be, I was going to talk to people who had stepped away from optometry for whatever reason. They've kind of
Yeah.
got a bit tired of it. And then I'm
Yeah.
trying to make it a bit more rounded
Yeah.
because I don't want optometry to come across as negative, because there's
Yeah.
lots of people who love it, have
Yeah.
absolutely amazing time in it.
Okay.
So you're in clinic 1 day a week,
Yeah. I'm in clinic
right?
1 day a week.
Yeah. And
And
so
your
the
question
question
was, yeah.
is,
Yeah.
so I've changed it. I've just changed
Okay.
my mind because I've looked
Yeah.
at my
Yeah.
notes. So why do you still see patients? Why are you still in clinic 1 day a week?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to lie, when I first came out of my pre-reg, I had a horrific pre-reg. Okay.
Okay.
And not going to lie, it was the moment during my pre-reg I wanted to quit many, many times over. And I came out of my pre-reg year, and once I qualified, I don't think I even wanted to carry on in optometry, if I'm completely honest with you. And it was Pius, my partner, my husband, who's also an optometrist, who, gave me the biggest support and, carried it through, obviously, because he'd worked hard to get to that point of qualifying. And for a good number of years, 4 or 5 years, if I'm completely honest, I was only surviving the days when I was in the consulting room in practice. I was not enjoying it whatsoever. And when I got married, I moved to Northampton, and I was working after a period of time in the same practice with Pew. So we're in the same practice, right? Same team members, same colleagues. And he was fantastic, right? Every single patient he would see, he'd be like, hey, how's it going? How's your morning? How's this? How's that? Whether it was patient
Yeah.
number 1, patient number 10, the last patient of the day, his mindset
It's
was the same.
disgusting. It's just
Yeah,
his
right?
positivity is disgusting.
Yeah, exactly. And this was not one day, not 2 days, every day. And I used to watch him thinking, wow, why are you enjoying this so much? And why am I feeling like I am just
Yeah.
surviving the day? And so, no, I wasn't enjoying it at all. And I think I was burnt out from pre-reg. I was struggling with depression and I was struggling with anxiety. So I was bringing that to my place of work at the time, not fully realizing the extent of my mental health. And it was only after I started getting that support and that help for myself and working on my own mindset that I realized a lot of it was to do with me and how I felt and how I perceive
Okay.
things. So once I started working on myself, my mindset changed and my then perception of the role changed. And
Yep.
I started seeing things so differently that it wasn't, oh, how many patients to go and is it with the one patient before lunch and the last one before the day. I wasn't seeing it like that. I was seeing patients as individuals. I was seeing them with a different compassion, different empathy, different understanding. And I felt like my role was so much more productive and more positive because I was changing and I was evolving. And so even though I started training in different areas outside of optometry, a lot of people say to me, like, is it something you want to, quit at some point now because you're doing so many other different things?
Yeah.
And I say no, because I love seeing patients now, whereas before it was a different story. And now when I'm seeing my patients, I feel like it's a privilege, a real privilege that I'm getting to spend that time with them and not just do a consultation, not just do an eye examination, but I can be there for them. And, they are able to open up to me. I'm able to understand them. I'm able to offer, different recommendations and advice, not just on eyewear and recommendations in terms of eye related issues, but
Yeah.
beyond that as well. And I feel like that's my higher purpose now. So that's why I'm still in practice.
And that's amazing. And I think people sometimes you kind of people draw a very fine line, not a very fine line, a very firm line, and
Yeah.
that is you're either in or you're out.
Right.
And there's no need, particularly with our profession, we're very lucky. I
Yeah.
think we're very fortunate in our profession. You can kind of be a little bit in
Yeah.
and be a little bit out, or you can be a
Right.
little bit in and you can be a lot out.
Yeah.
And I think when people go into it, and correct me if you're wrong, I think most optometrists go into optometry because they want to help people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and they want a kind of positive influence on the
Mm-hmm.
world and the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get into the big bad world
Mm-hmm.
and you realize there are other factors that potentially have that come into it, unfortunately, like maybe conversion rates or just working in a room with no windows,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
suffering from seasonal disorders and things like that. I think it can be a bit overwhelming, and people are kind of like maybe a bit like what Peach was saying. Well, you've come this far, you've
Mm-hmm.
worked so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you kind of just keep going,
Yeah.
kind of thing? That's really interesting because I mean we know each other and we've hung out, but we've never really
Mm-hmm.
chatted like this, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's an event or something's going on. There's loads of people
Mm-hmm.
going around. Um, was there kind of one event? Was it that you remember, kind of a specific event that made you think, you know what, I need something more than the consulting room. I need something outside of this. Was it like a trigger event
Not
kind of thing?
necessarily a certain event, because pretty much the minute I got married, which was, I got married at the age of 23. So when I got married at the age of 23 and I moved to Northampton, and it was probably 2 years after qualifying, I started my life coaching course straight away.
Okay.
Right. So even though I was in practice 4 days a week, I knew that psychology that I wanted to do initially, that passion was still
Yeah.
there. So on the side, without giving up, practice, I started my life coaching course straight away. And over time, I started building on that. So it wasn't a case of this or that or one or the other. I wanted to, have that, stability and security, because still at that point I was just surviving, but I wanted to explore the other options and take up something that I was passionate about. And again, all stemming, I suppose, from my own mindset and mental health issues. That's why I was pursuing
Yeah.
the psychology part of it. So it wasn't necessarily an event as such, but over time, when that area started developing and furthering, and as I started transforming my own self, it became a thing where actually it doesn't have to be this or that, but I was able to utilize those tools into practice and change how I function there. And then I was able to do both side by side. And then over time, I guess, it was more of a case of reducing the time, not cutting it out completely, but reducing time in practice so that I could
Yeah.
focus on the well-being part of it as well, and take that, and let that flourish and thrive.
And you guys are, uh, well, I don't know, but the way I perceive it, you guys are smashing it. All right.
Mm,
Particularly, I see you guys um, doing really well on social media. Obviously, social media is not necessarily the best gauge
no,
of how someone is doing
100%.
um, in real life.
Right.
Just because, well, we all know what social media is like and how
100%.
potentially toxic it can be.
Yes.
But you guys seem to be doing well, and you seem happy and stuff. So for the audience,
Yeah.
because I have a rough idea of what you do.
Hmm.
So what do you do now? So
Okay, so
what kind of stuff do you do now?
yeah, so okay, so I set up my wellbeing company, so Inspiring Success, over 10 years ago, and that's when I started qualifying in different modalities of coaching, NLP, and then rapid transformation therapy. And I was doing this mainly for individuals one to one, and I was doing it for schools. I was teaching children how to do meditation, mindfulness, and then I was taking it into businesses as well. Nothing to do with optometry. And then little bit by little bit, I started doing articles for like optician and OT who wanted, publications around communication or well-being and things like that. So, started dabbling that a little bit. But it's more during the pandemic when everything was obviously very unknown, very uncertain, very insecure. And Peace and I created a Facebook group for optometry, and we started looking at the well-being of people in our profession, how they felt. And it was only really then, I suppose, that realization hit me that a lot of people are struggling, and this was during that pandemic, but it wasn't solely the reason of the pandemic. People were struggling before that as well, and but people were talking a little bit more about it because when I started struggling with mental health, there was no social media. I'm showing my age here as such, and there wasn't, it's not okay to
I'm
be
older than
okay. And
you.
yeah, well, I'm 41 right now, so so back then there wasn't all these awareness and signposts and well-being forums. So that struggle for me was very isolating. But I think for still, a lot of people, mental health was a stigma. So when we created this Facebook group, it gave people a little bit of a platform where they could share their worries, their thoughts, their stresses, and that sort of thing. And Pew said to me, we need to do something more, in the profession. And, with that skill sort of being a optometrist and doing all my therapy work, let's combine it and do something there. And so, yeah, I'd done some podcasts. Yeah, I'd done the articles. And Pew's thought, let's do some, CPD. Why can't we create some CPD around well-being and start implementing that?
Yeah.
And access more people and get that awareness in that profession a lot more. And again, back then my confidence and my anxiety was not where it needed to be, so I kept declining peace, and I said, no, I can't do this. And then over time, I worked on myself, and despite me doing this in other places, I thought, well, okay, let me give this a go. And so we created our first wellbeing CPD, and it was received so positively because when you think about CPD, a lot of it is clinical, which it needs to be, of course. And it was always about focusing on the patient, right? What we can do to best serve our patients, which of course we
Yeah.
need to do, that's our role, but are we focusing on ourselves? And we don't often do that, right? Whether we think we need it or not, we don't often do that. And we can work in a practice where you could be the sole practitioner. We can work in a practice where there could be multiple consulting rooms, and we could still feel isolated because you still don't get that chance always to have a conversation. And
Yeah.
so when we were doing these CPDs based around well-being and focusing on you as a person and how you can show up for yourself and how that could make a difference for you then showing up to people around you, it was just so refreshing, and the feedback was just it was incredible. And so we continued to implement more and more CPD around that, and then that kind of, I guess, accelerated because it just wasn't that readily available, but it was needed.
I think you're right. I think mental health is definitely within the last decade, I would
Yeah.
say, has really it's really come more to the fore.
Yeah.
about people looking after their mental well-being as well as their physical well-being.
Yeah.
It's all very, you got to be strong, you got to be fit, but we weren't thinking about those grey days when you just kind of just don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
I think people have those, and it's how to manage those and overcome those. I I had a question. I did have a question, and I've talked it out of my head. So it obviously couldn't have been that important at the moment. But, oh no, that was it. What I was going to say was, do you also think, because I think this, and obviously we're both Indian, Gujarati heritage. Do you think there are cultural aspects to it in terms of mental well-being? I don't know what other cultures, how they're brought up with
Mm.
regards to mental health and mental well-being.
Yeah.
But I know within our culture,
Mm.
we don't really do it, as far as I know, or we didn't used to do it, which
Mm.
is quite strange considering, we're the home of yoga and we're the home of meditation
Mm.
and we're the
Mm.
home of all of these things, origins of all of these things. But in a modern Gujarati household where I was growing up,
Mm.
not because my parents didn't care,
Mm.
but it wasn't how you getting on kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
You were just, and they did as well. They've been through tough times, like my
Yeah.
grandmas and stuff, been through really tough times, and they just
Yeah.
kind of battled through. So do you think there's a big cultural
Oh my gosh,
element
absolutely,
to it?
absolutely. And in my line of work, when I'm doing therapy with clients, whether it's of an Indian background or a different background, culture plays a huge part of it. And it's exactly like you say, so many people from our culture, we didn't have that opportunity to speak about things. So whatever we were going through, so, when I was going through things, I would just literally think something's wrong with me. Why am I the only one feeling like this? People around me seem to have it, got it all together. No one else is talking about their problems. And then when I ever did speak about it or feel it was a case of, why are you sad? Why are you upset? You've got everything going for you. You're qualified
Yeah,
as an optometrist, you've got a partner, family, da, 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 da. Everything externally is looking great. What have you got to be upset about? And that made you feel worse, made you feel guilty, and then the general comparisons that, it's not like you can, you've got starving kids in Africa or wherever it is in developing
yeah,
countries. So again, what have you got to be upset about? So you again retreat into yourself. You don't have that, option to talk. And that's always been the case because that's how our generations were taught to believe as well. You don't speak about problems, you get on with it. And that's what they've been known to do generation after generation. And so even for my parents now, when I'm speaking about it, and I've had publications in, for example, the Daily Mail, and my dad used to run a newsagents, right? So he'd pick up that paper and he'd see my articles, and they're talking about depression, talking about how I felt. And so for them, it's all very new. And it's only in the last couple of years when my mom's friends have now said to them, oh, it's really good that Sheena's speaking about this because my daughter has been going through this and she's now talking about it. And you can see the shift, but it's only
yeah,
just happening. And that's why, even though it's hard sometimes for my parents to hear me talking like this and thinking about this and speaking out loud so publicly, I know that that shift is so required for people to work on themselves, to not have that stigma attached to them, so that they can, progress in their mental health and well-being journey.
yeah. And you guys are doing such an amazing job. Um, you do other stuff as well, don't you? Have you written a book?
I have written 2 books. Yes, I have written 2 books. So one was released about 4 years ago, Perfectly Imperfect Mom, and the second one was released last March, so exactly a year ago, The Power of Being Perfectly Imperfect. And that is exactly the biggest advocate I
So
am
how
of
did they
being
come about?
perfect.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Sheena, to cut
so
you off. How
that
did they
that
come about?
first book, Perfectly Perfect Mom, when I was having anxiety, when I was going through depression, and I had been going through it for a good 15 years, and the biggest change and inspiration was my children. And with my children, I always thought I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough basically in any way. I'm not a good optometrist, I'm not a good wife or daughter, a sister. And then when I had the girls, I've got 2 girls who are 11 and 13 now. When I had them, I always felt like I wasn't a good enough mom because, again, I was doing the
Okay,
typical thing of comparing to people around me, and I'd see other moms, other parents who'd had it together, who looked like they had it together and were confident. And for me, I couldn't even take my kids out on a walk outside because I was so scared of judgment, right? I
okay,
couldn't even go to play groups because I was scared of judgment. I couldn't even feel the petrol in my car because I was too scared of judgment. I couldn't do the basic things that are really simple to somebody else. And for me, it took so much energy just to even walk into a supermarket, with my children. And it would be a case of so much mental energy getting consumed. And at the end of the day, I'd start crying and being really upset. And this was up and down emotions daily in front of my kids. And I thought, I want to be an inspiration to them, right? I don't want them to see me like this. I want to be a better person for them, but also for me too.
Yep.
And that's when I started to really dig deep, really started to work on myself, really started to let go of the external noise, started doing things like meditation, mindfulness, working on myself with therapy. And I started to embrace me for me. I didn't have to be the loud, bubbly person. I didn't have to be the out there, confident person. I didn't have to be all
Yep.
these things that I thought the world needed me to be. So I started embracing this perfectly imperfect version of myself. And as soon as I started to embrace who I was, maybe the quieter one, maybe the a bit more reserved one, maybe not so out there one, I started to just be a real me. And because I started to embrace that, I felt much more accepted just in myself. And I
Okay.
thought, this is who I want to be. And that's where Perfect Perfect One, the books came from.
That I always find it amazing that, I mean, you're amazing anyway, but I always find it amazing that when people write books, because I, d- I don't get it. Does that make sense? So for me, everything is snapshot, right? So that's why I
Right,
like
right.
photographs.
Yes.
Snapshot, post it, snapshot, post it.
Mm, yeah.
To sit there, to, assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when
Mm,
you write a book like that, there'll be personal experience within it.
yeah.
But particularly if you are giving advice,
Right.
there has to be some elements of science behind it,
Of
or
course.
some evidence of, deep thinking behind
Yeah.
it. You know, we are
Yeah,
not
it does. You have to
Twitter
be,
slash X,
yeah,
where
yeah.
you
It
just
can't just
kind
be
of,
opinions only. Yeah.
yeah,
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 yeah, absolutely. I have to do a lot of research going into that. So you're stating your own thoughts, your opinions, but then I have to do a lot of research behind it. And then how is it conveying? How am I getting this message across? Because the purpose behind it is to support anyone that felt like me once upon a time, right? So
yeah.
I want that. That's the ultimate purpose. So is that coming across?
Do you find, because if I compare it to when I no, so I do write a couple of lectures here and there, and I do some articles here and there. Do you find that, or did you find that when you wrote your book and you did your research,
Mm,
it also kind of helped you with self-learning and self-therapy? Whereas,
mm,
when I write an article, normally someone's asked me because they think I know it all,
mm,
or not, I know a lot,
yeah,
but I usually don't. So then I'm
we do.
scrambling
Yeah,
to make sure I'm really up to date
yes,
with the latest, thoughts and
yes,
management and things like that. So when you wrote your books, was it a bit like, I'd never thought about this. Actually,
100%.
this is quite interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Every time, whether I've written a book or whether I'm doing these well-being CPDs, and you've got it every time you deliver, even if it's the same CPD, you want to make sure the statistics, the research, the data is relevant and up to date. So you're constantly learning, constantly learning. And I think you can never learn, enough. No matter how much of a
Yep.
professional you are in that field, how skilled you are in that field, every day is a growth day. Every day is a learning day. So yeah, definitely.
So that's amazing. We've got 25 minutes. We've absolutely smashed through this, and obviously I'm I think we're in society where everyone likes short bursts of
Yeah, of
information,
course.
and I just you have such an amazing journey. You've done so many amazing things.
Thank
I
you.
wanted people just to kind of see that and
Mm,
understand that, particularly within optometry, you can do
mm,
it,
yes,
but it's flexible enough to let you
absolutely.
do other things initially, like you did your course,
Yeah.
and then as your course improved and as you got more confident, as you did more work in it, you
Hmm.
can sort of transition a little bit
Absolutely.
into other fields. And I wanted people to hear that,
Yeah,
if that
absolutely.
makes
Don't
sense.
limit yourself.
And
Whatever you're doing right now in this moment, don't ever feel like you can't diversify or change or adapt. And even if you just got a brand new idea, go
yeah,
for it. So yeah, absolutely.
so that just made me think of one thing, which I think people will think about. I think it does come up. Were there sacrifices? Does that make sense? I mean, like for me, for example, sometimes I think, you know what, maybe I don't want to do this, but if I do that, what's going to happen about the money? right? Because I'm now in a situation, you know, I got two kids as well, right? Got the
Right.
10-year-old just got into secondary school, the
Yeah.
little one who's eating me out of house of home, and you kind of sit there and go, right, well, if I were to drop everything now, all
Right.
right, and just go and become a wildlife photographer because I like taking
Mm-hmm.
photographs, right?
Mm-hmm.
How am I
Mm-hmm.
going to pay the bills? Like, so was there
Yeah.
anything like that kind of
I
a
think
bit of a
it's just a
challenge in
case
your
of
thing?
adapting and just exploring the options without cutting things off. As I said in the beginning, it doesn't have to be one or the other initially. It can just be that
Yeah,
and that together, right? Until you figure things out, and things don't have to be set as well. So it's just a journey that you have to take those first steps, and that's the important bit. So you don't have to think, I'm going to be that photographer and I'm going to quit this, and that's the only way I can do it. Just do both for a little while and do one or a bit less of the other one. So it just is about figuring things out, but taking those steps and not thinking, well, stopping at the thought, have that
yeah,
thought, but then take that action with it as well as the
yeah.
next part.
Cool. Thank you. There is one more question I have to
Mm,
ask you,
yeah, of course.
but I think I want to finish with that.
Mm.
So what I'm gonna let you do, because you're my friend and I know you have wellbeing events.
Yes.
Are there any wellbeing events coming up
Oh,
that
well,
you would
I'm
like
glad you
that you would
asked.
like to mention? And it's my podcast; I can talk about whatever I want.
Oh, thank
And then
you.
I'll stick it in the link in
Yeah,
below. So
yeah, that
if anyone wants to join, so
Yes,
when's
so
your next
we
event?
do. Yeah, so we do have a fabulous Optometry Wellbeing Day event on the 11th of May this year in the Midlands in Kettering Park Hotel, and it's just a place to connect and have fun. And there's CPD available as well, but we've got things like yoga, we've got ice baths, we've got accelerating, glass walking, and as I mentioned, two CPD activities for 6 interactive points, and we'll be ending with an eyeball, so 3-course dinner, DJ, and our Optometry Hero award will be presented that night as well. So a whole day
That
and
is
night of coming together.
that's amazing. I got busy last time, so I was away, and I was going to get
You
told
popped
off.
in as a
But I
guest
popped it.
appearance.
I did dropped in, and it was good. The ball was fun. It was great. So, last question. We got a couple of minutes. Is what final and single piece of advice would you give anyone listening or watching this about anything? So, initially, I was like, "Oh, let me make optometry related," but you know what? I don't care.
Yeah.
One piece of advice you could give someone.
Start
What would
with
it be?
yourself. With anything
Okay.
that you're doing, start with yourself and focus on your mental and physical well-being, because it doesn't matter if you're the most skilled optometrist or whatever field you're in, it doesn't matter. Focus on yourself because you have more control over your life than you realize. But that all starts with that one thought, that one step, that one person, and that one person being yourself.
That is amazing. Thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it. Now, Piyush is going to have a serious,
Yes.
he's going to have to bring his serious A game to even come close to that. Thanks a lot, Sheena.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's super grateful to always be in connection with you and for having me on this podcast.